Footnotes from the Life Application Study Bible. Held 50 days after Passover, Pentecost was also called the Festival of Harvest. It was one of three major annual festivals, a festival at Thanksgiving for the harvested crops. Jesus was crucified at Passover time, and he ascended 40 days after his resurrection. The Holy Spirit came 50 days after his resurrection and 10 days after his ascension. Jews of many nations had gathered in Jerusalem for this festival. Thus, Peter's speech was given to an international audience, and it resulted in a worldwide harvest of new believers, the first converts to Christianity who had not followed Jesus during his earthly life. This was a fulfillment of John the Baptist's words about the Holy Spirit baptizing with fire, and of the prophet Joel's words about the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Why tongues of fire? Fire symbolizes God's purifying presence, which burns away the undesirable elements of our lives and eats our hearts aflame to ignite the lives of others. On Mount Sinai, God confirmed the validity of the Old Testament law with fire from heaven. On Mount Carmel, God sent fire from heaven to burn up Elijah's sacrifice, signifying God's consuming power. At Pentecost, God confirmed the validity of the Holy Spirit's ministry by sending fire. God made his presence known to this group of believers in a spectacular way: roaring wind, fire, and his Holy Spirit. Would you like God to reveal himself to you in such a recognizable way? He may do so, but be wary of forcing your expectations on God. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 10 through 13, Elijah also needed a message from God. First came a great wind, then an earthquake, and finally a fire. But God's message came in a gentle whisper. God may use dramatic methods to work in your life, or he may speak in gentle whispers. Wait patiently and always listen. These people were literally speaking in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability, a miraculous attention getter for the international crowd gathered in town for the festival. All the nationalities represented recognized their own language being spoken. More than just miraculous speaking drew the people's attention, however. They saw the presence and power of the Holy Spirit. The apostles continued to minister in the Holy Spirit's power wherever they went. Jesus does not limit the kingdom in any race or group of people. He offers salvation to all people without regard to nationality. Visitors in Jerusalem were surprised to hear the apostles and other believers speaking in languages other than their own, but they need not have been. God does all kinds of miracles to spread the good news, using many languages as he calls all kinds of people to become his followers. No matter what your race, color, sex, nationality, or language, God speaks to you. What do you need him to say to you? And in what area of your life would you like to hear his voice? Are you listening? Why are all these places mentioned? This is a list of many lands from which Jews had come to the festival in Jerusalem. These Jews were not from Palestine, because their ancestors had been dispersed to other parts of the world through captivities and persecutions. Very likely, some of the Jews who responded to Peter's message returned to their homelands with God's good news of salvation. Thus, God prepared the way for the spread of the good news. As you read Acts, you will see how the way was often prepared for Paul and other messengers by people who had become believers at Pentecost. The church at Rome, for example, was probably begun by such Jewish believers. Every believer has a story. Be encouraged by asking others to share what God has done in their lives. When the crowd recognized that something supernatural was taking place, they were curious for an explanation. At this point, Peter stepped forward and explained what was happening. This, of course, gave him an opportunity to talk about God and the good news of Jesus. This should be the pattern in our lives as well. There are events and circumstances in the world and in people's lives every day that cause them to ask, what does this mean? These give us the opportunity to explain our hope of salvation and how these people's stories fit into God's greater story. If our lives are different because of the light of Christ in us, others will be all the more curious about why. What is different about your life? What supernatural evidence about your life story could only be explained by God's handiwork? Share those stories and you will be sharing the good news about Jesus.